Welcome, my loves. I am Madame Luna, here to guide you through tonight's story. Before we begin, remember to subscribe so you never miss a tale whispered under the moonlight. And tell me in the comments, if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would your spirit take you? Now settle in, close your eyes if you wish, and let the story unfold. AITA for keeping the keys to the community garden. When Mrs. Rivera pressed the ring of keys into my palm, they were warmer than metal should be. There were 8 of them, each a different size, each with a little ribbon so she could tell them apart in the dark. The red ribbon unlocked the street gate, the one with the cheerful arch that said Maple Mews Community Garden. The blue one opened the tool shed, the green one, the spigot, the gold one, the cabinet with the good pruning shears, which she called the violin. She said, "I'm finally going south for the winter. Keep watch for me, Carino." I said yes, before I thought about the weight of yes. The garden is a narrow strip tucked between 2 brick buildings, a secret stitched into the block with twine and patience. By day, it's a patchwork of beds, tomatoes caged in wire, basil reaching for any sun it can find, marigolds bobbing like tiny suns. By evening, the gravel paths glow with whatever light the sky remembers. Neighbors wander in, tip watering cans, talk to the mint like it's a shy child. At dusk, the sparrows hold a meeting in the elm, and then depart all at once, a soft exhale of feathers. Mrs. Rivera had a rule. The gate stays open until sundown in summer and 6 p.m. in winter. She'd sit on the bench with her thermos and tell you stories about the time the pumpkins grew so wild they spilled into the alley like runaway moons. But the last month before she left, there were incidents. A whole bed of peppers vanished overnight. Someone took the coiled hose. A pair of teenagers decided the herb bed was a good place for midnight hookah. She told me all this with a smile so small it looked like a thread. "You're young," she said. "You'll figure it out." The first evening with the keys, I locked the gate at dusk and stood listening to the neighborhood turn blue. I felt responsible, which is different from feeling powerful. Responsibility hums like a refrigerator in the next room. I checked the shed twice. I counted the trowels without knowing how many there should be. I left a note on the bulletin board, "New caretaker while Mrs. Rivera travels. Same hours for now. Come say hello." I signed it with my first name and a small doodle of a basil leaf. People did come. Ms. Green from 2B, who taps the sage leaves before she smells them, stopped by with a jar of peach jam and a warning. "Elliot won't like the earlier lock." She said it like weather. I asked who Elliot was. She said he's the kind of neighbor who thinks your porch light is a lighthouse that owes him safe passage. I laughed, but it got caught in my throat. The next afternoon, I met him tall, gray at the temples, carrying a reusable bag filled with clinking jars. He said, "I pickle after sundown. The air is different. Don't lock me out of my brine." I told him I understood and that I'd be around most evenings, but I couldn't guarantee late hours. He elevated one eyebrow like a drawbridge. "We keep this gate open later," he said, "so people can breathe." That night, I turned the key at sundown and stood inside the fence while Elliot watched from the sidewalk. didn't say anything. He just looked at me the way storm clouds look, full of something they haven't released yet. 2 days later, a printed flyer appeared on the board. Petition: restore late hours to our garden. Names collected like dew. Some I knew, some I didn't. There were notes in the margins: working parents need evenings. Kids like stars. Someone drew a little moon with a face that looked accusatory. I went home with the keys heavy in my pocket and stared at the ceiling fan until it spun my thoughts into a soft rope. I wrote a letter. I said we'd try a compromise. Twilight hours on Fridays, gate open until 9 p.m. And I'd sit there with a thermos like Mrs. Rivera, counting the trowels with imaginary numbers. I added a sign-up sheet for volunteers, because responsibility spreads best when it's thin as apple butter. 3 people wrote their names. Miss Green, a teenager named Pax, who draws planets in the margins of everything, and Elliot, whose signature looked like a gust of wind. On the first Twilight Friday, the garden filled itself quietly. Pax brought a tiny speaker and let it play a song that sounded like the inside of a seashell. Ms. Green told me that Basil will forgive a lot if you talk to it like an old friend. Elliot arrived last, a jar tucked under his arm. "Brine," he said, "for the peppers that disappeared." He smiled with only part of his face. Around 8:30, a soft orange cat slipped through the fence slats and sniffed everything like a customs officer. It chose me, the way cats do when you're trying to look serious. I scratched its chin and felt my shoulders loosen. Elliot said, "That's Marmalade. He belongs to no one, which means he belongs to everyone." Pax fed it a green bean like a gentleman offering a cigarette. Marmalade looked offended and went to sit under the marigolds. At 9, I locked the gate. Elliot nodded and said, "See, the sky didn't fall." We stacked watering cans. The good pruning shears went back into the violin, and the garden exhaled its spice and dirt breath. I walked home with empty pockets because the keys were around my neck on a ribbon now, the way Mrs. Rivera wore them. I told myself we had found a balance. Responsibility purred like a cat on a warm lap. Balance lasted until the storm. It came on a Tuesday while I was at work, the kind of rain that looks like the sky took off a heavy backpack and dumped everything out. When I reached the garden after, the gate was ajar. Mud slicked the paths. The tool shed door swung in small, tired arcs. Inside, the good gloves were gone. The coiled hose uncoiled itself into a muddy snake, and the cabinet that held the violin had splinters for a lock. I stood there and felt the careful hours of so many hands, scattered like seeds. The birds got first. I called Miss Green. She came in a yellow raincoat that made her look like a lighthouse. We righted what we could, swept water that wanted to be everywhere at once, and counted the losses out loud like we were nomming ghosts. Elliot arrived with a flashlight and a face that couldn't decide between worry and "I told you so." He didn't say either. He just picked up a trowel and began to dig a small trench to drain a puddle that was pretending to be a lake. That night, I wrote another note and tacked it up with firm hands. Until we repair and replace what was taken, the garden will close at sundown every day. volunteers needed for rebuilding and for community meeting. I left a sign up. In the morning, there were 6 names. By evening, there were 15. Someone taped a Ziploc bag with a $20 bill inside and wrote, "For the violin." The community meeting happened under a low sky that threatened more rain, but didn't deliver. We set chairs in a circle, because circles fall in on themselves less often than rows. People brought cookies, and someone, bless them, brought a box of tissues that went unused but mattered. I explained the thefts and the storm, and then the $1,000 question, hours. Should we lock earlier, later? Always. Never. Arguments rose up like polite geese. Working parents needed late hours. Older neighbors wanted to see their herbs in the morning dew. A runner said the garden was her reward after dusk loops. A man I'd never met said he'd found solace among the tomatoes after his divorce, when sleep felt too sharp. Then Elliot stood. He didn't look at me. He looked at the keys around my neck, and then at the bench where Mrs. Rivera used to sit. "My wife," he said, and his voice did something I hadn't heard before, liked to come here after dark in the summer. She said the mosquitoes respected boundaries in the garden, and the mint listened better at night. When she got sick, this was the last place we came together that felt like it was built for living, not for leaving. He cleared his throat and looked at the gravel. When the gate is locked, I feel like the story stops. We were quiet. The cat chose that moment to purr, theatrical and sincere. I said, because someone had to say something, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." I held up the sign-up sheets. We can't promise the garden will always be open, but we can promise it will always be cared for. What if we create a roster, Lighthouse hosts, who lock up at 9 or 10 on specific nights? More eyes, more hands, less chance of storms catching us with the door ajar. There was murmuring. Miss Green nodded like a metronome. Pax said they could host on Saturdays, as long as there was a place to sketch planets. Elliot's face softened a degree, which is like the sun moving an inch. "I can host Tuesdays," he said. "I pickle on Tuesdays." We wrote it all down. We decided on motion lights near the shed, reflective numbers on the gate, a whistle hanging by the board that nobody wanted to use, but everyone felt better seeing. On the first hosted late night, the garden glowed gently. I made tea in a thermos that smelled faintly of last winter's cinnamon. I wore a sweater that remembered campfires. People came with jars and stories. A kid named Maya counted snails and declared them honorary members. At closing, Elliot locked the gate with a little ceremony, like a librarian stamping a beloved book. He handed me the keys, as if passing a baton in a race where nobody is chasing us. Weeks passed. The marigolds outlasted their own bravado. The basil forgave us for the storm. The good shears came back, donated by a neighbor with a hardware store discount and a soft spot